He's the co-founder of Green Mondays and has, in fact, achieved so much in such a short period of time, in just 3 years. It's quite amazing. Mr. Yeung was selected to be the Purpose Economy as the Asia 100 Pioneers, as well as Men of 2013. Local Heroes 2013, Best Idea of 2013, and awarded the Marketing Excellence Award by Local Media. Mr. Yeung has authored several best-selling novels, a regular columnist on Week East Week, You Magazine, EtNet, Metro News, and Buddhist Compassion. He is the director of AIDS Foundation, as well as the Hong Kong Buddhist Foundation. Mr. Yeung, I give you the stage. A little stage that we have.
Well, good morning. 大家早晨. Well, this is a special morning. This is the morning of World Vegetarian Day. And really, I mean, I was like thinking, given the location is slightly off the center, or a little bit off, you know, the popular or the crowded area, I was wondering if the event happens so early, you know, how will the response be? But I'm so thrilled to see so many people here at 9 a.m. So, well, give a round of applause to yourself. I think as speakers, we really feed off the energy of the audience. And today, by the way, I'm suffering a little bit of a cold, so as you can hear a little bit. So, but really, I mean, bringing so much positive energy to today and to the events. Well, I think today is indeed a big milestone. Besides the fact that it is World Vegetarian Day, is that Friends of the Earth is bringing so much efforts and resources, and also drawing more and more people to know about this. Well, again, if you talk about 10 years ago, and I'm sure, you know, Bobsy can talk about that during his speech, is, well, 10 years ago, or even 7 or 8 years ago, when we talk about vegetarianism in Hong Kong, it's really a very niche, very, very small crowd. Now, I myself, I've been a vegetarian for about 15 years, since the beginning of 2001. Since January of 2001, so almost 15 years. And I started vegetarianism when I lived in New York. I spent over 10 years studying and working in New York, and I started being a vegetarian there. Now, I remember very clearly in my mind that, well, at the very early stage when I turned vegetarian, whenever I visit a restaurant in New York, well, first is the non-vegetarian restaurant. Most of the time, majority of the time, I would have no problem finding dishes that I can order. And as a matter of fact, most of them are labeled very clearly already, you know, with a V, or sometimes like V or VG, depending on, you know, vegetarian or even vegan, right? So, first of all, at non-vegetarian restaurant, I had no problem ordering. And this is from 15 years ago. But when I go to a vegetarian restaurant, there were things that were very remarkable. Well, first of all, I was always surrounded, and if you go today, you will continue to be surrounded by young and very trendy people. So you feel young too. Now, looking around, rather than seeing like bars that you drink alcohol, you'll be seeing fruit bars or juice bar, right? So going into a veggie restaurant, a lot of times the first thing you see is a wall or a bar of a lot of fruits. Very colorful, very appealing, and of course very healthy. And surrounding that bar is, rather than people, you know, drinking alcohol, you see a lot of very, very gorgeous people, very energetic people, and models too, by the way, and very pretty models, you know, enjoying the different type of juice or smoothies. So I actually don't know if I was drawn to vegetarianism because of that, you know. But so that was the way I enjoyed my first couple years of vegetarian life. And then I moved back to Hong Kong end of 2003, early 2004. And then at that time I was about 26 or 27, okay, back in 2003, 2004. Now, and when I went to a vegetarian restaurant and I look around, I was the youngest person in the entire room. And then my uncles and aunties would talk to me this way. It's like, oh, David, you're so good. You start vegetarian so young. We're so proud of you. You know, you're such a good kid. And I'm like, well, maybe, you know, why was I so alone? What was so special about it, right? The contrast was very obvious. It's actually it's so blatantly obvious in terms of the contrast. Again, in the West, or particularly New York where I lived in, it was a very cool thing, it was a very trendy thing, and more importantly, people talk about the health or even the environmental aspect or impact of eating meat, and why, if we reduce meat consumption, it is good for not just ourselves, but also for the general society and the environment. But here, even though I myself, I am a Buddhist, but the perception is always very limiting. And there's this stigma surrounding vegetarianism. Now, I receive a ton of questions, and I wrote this column just a few weeks ago, that I quote the top 20 questions or comments that people would say when they see a vegetarian. So some of the comments would be, oh, I feel so sorry for you. Do you get enough nutrition? You know, I'm so worried. Did you have some really big setback or obstacle in your life? What caused this big turnaround, you know? And some people actually ask me, this is like, you know, 10 years ago, oh, like, did you experience a breakup? You know, did your girlfriend dump you? Now, I have no idea why relationship and vegetarianism have anything to do with each other. Now, of course, even further is that there are people who ask me is, oh, you know, and knowing that I am a Buddhist, so are you about to turn into a monk? When are you going to shave your head? So, the stigma or misperception, and I'm sure there are many vegetarians in the room too, and you can definitely attest to that, is you have heard that type of questions too. Now, the funny thing is, when they look at me and they realize that, well, I'm not that, you know, super skinny, pale person, and actually I probably look slightly healthier than they are. And then the moment they say, oh, do you get enough nutrition? And then they look at me and then they look at themselves. They say, actually, I think you look better than I am. So I experienced that kind of, you know, that kind of life for many years. And whenever I visit a vegetarian restaurant, people order 羅漢齋炒麵 or 羅漢齋炒飯 for me. And then I'm like, well, vegetarians eat more than just 羅漢齋. And they're so, actually, it's come out of good intention. So they're like, oh, you know, we will take care of you, David. You know, you will have something to eat. You know, we especially ask the restaurant to arrange 羅漢齋 for you. You know, and on one hand, I appreciate the effort, but on the other hand, I hate it. Because actually, a lot of times restaurants, when they cook 羅漢齋, it's just like a plate of, you don't exactly know what that is. So I guess in the back of my mind, I've been planting this seed for a long time. That is, well, hopefully one day, you know, someone, some groups, some organizations will start a movement, will start a whole education campaign to tell people the correct information about vegetarianism. So that's, you know, something that's sitting, you know, in the back of my mind for a long time. Now, at the same time, some of the staggering numbers were just too hard to overlook. Now, United Nations has been saying for over a decade, this is back in 2005, if not earlier, that the most threatening issue of our planet right now is global warming or climate change. And to most people's surprise, the biggest contributor to climate change or carbon emission is not what we expect. Usually, we think of cars, we think of vehicles, transportation, manufacturing, or the energy sector as the reason for carbon emission. If you ask like 100 people, probably less than 5, if not less than 3 people would say anything related to food. people would say, oh, it must be cars, it must be manufacturing. So whenever we talk about a low carbon lifestyle, we think of those things. But the reality is the UN has been saying for a decade that actually, yes, transportation is a cause for carbon emission, but it's not number one. Manufacturing, of course, is a cause for carbon emission, but it's not the number one factor. The number one reason that causes carbon footprints is actually the livestock industry. Well, to be more specific, is meat. Our consumption of meat. The first time when I read that, even I was a little bit in disbelief. I was already vegetarian at that point, but even I was in disbelief. Wait, why are you telling me that a cow hurts the environment more than a car? I was just, the equation did not work for me. And then I started to study a lot more, and then I realized that, well, first of all, our global population has risen dramatically in the last 20, 30 years, and it will continue to rise dramatically. And our diet habit has also changed dramatically in the last 20, 30 years. Now, with the popularity of fast food chains and our indulgence of meat consumption, it used to be that 30, 40 years ago, eating a piece of steak is a big thing, and people probably don't eat that even once a month. And also from an economic standpoint, it was very expensive. So, tongai, having a chicken, right, usually is a big deal. Sometimes it is reserved only for birthdays, for example. But now, on any given day, if one person is not eating meat in any meal, that person seems like he or she is deprived of something. So, from a population standpoint and from a diet pattern or behavior standpoint, we have changed a lot. And it caused a new industry that probably 60 years ago did not exist. And it's the factory farming industry. Basically, is farming animals in an industrial way. Nowadays, for example, when you go to eat fried chicken in a fast food chain, it used to be that it took about 120, anywhere from 120 to 150 days to raise a chicken. Nowadays, it only takes about 35 to 40 days. So 70% less time. But that industrially raised chicken is actually double, if not triple, the size of the old one. So 70% less time, but double or triple the size. And the reason is because they put in a lot of antibiotics, they put in a lot of hormones, they put in a lot of chemicals, or genetically modified anything into the process. So what we are eating right now actually is very different from what we ate 20, 30 years ago. And besides the fact that it's bad for our health, it also creates this huge livestock population that they are consuming water, they are consuming land, and they are emitting greenhouse gas. In the case of cows or lambs, they don't just emit carbon dioxide. They also emit a type of gas called methane. Now, I'm sure there are people in this room who are very familiar, but for those who don't know, methane is about 25 times, if not more, worse in terms of greenhouse gas impact. So there's this basic comparison that between a cow and a car, we're talking about a normal sized car, not a double-deck bus, right? Between a normal sized car and a cow, the greenhouse gas emission from a cow is 7 or 8 times worse than a normal car. So on any given year, on an annual basis, we're talking about the cow is 7 to 8 times worse in terms of greenhouse gas effect. So there's this quote which sounds very funny, but it's actually true, and that is, someone who is driving an energy-saving car, such as a Prius, if that person is a carnivore, a meat eater, and compared to someone who is driving a Hummer, which clearly is not a green car, but if that person is a vegan, the person who is driving a Hummer is still greener than the person who is a carnivore. So that was a big impact to me, and this is from many, many years ago. And I remember, I mean, the report of United Nations, IPCC, I remember that report was like 179 pages. And for whatever reason, I actually read the whole paper. It took a long time to finish it, but this is a long time ago. But I was so intrigued and shocked by the data that all of a sudden you're telling me that being a vegetarian is not just purely about compassion to animals, and it's not just purely about improving your own health, but it is actually one of the most direct way to help the environment. One of the best way to become a friend of the earth is simply reduce your meat consumption. So when I look at it from all angles, I was like, wow, are there things in the world that can solve so many problems just by simply taking one action? Like usually, when you're doing something for someone, right? Usually it means you are sacrificing. But in the case of eating green, you are gaining health, you are eating more balance, you are not taking in any of the toxic or any of the chemicals that they put into food nowadays, processed food and particularly meat. So you're reducing your intake of those bad elements. So by doing that, you are already helping your health. Now, talk about the health concern. Again, those people who were very deeply concerned every time when they see a vegetarian say, oh, how are you doing? What are you eating? How do you get your protein? Usually the first question I answer back is, well, how are you dealing with your cholesterol? What is your situation with your 3 highs? Well, the 3 highs are high blood pressure, high blood sugar, and high cholesterol. And well, nowadays, it doesn't need a really obese or fat person to have the 3 highs. I remember this is when we launched Green Monday, like the second month of launching Green Monday. And I was doing an interview for a magazine. And I was talking about the cholesterol problem of people nowadays. And I mentioned that even someone who looked thin could also be high or over the limit in terms of cholesterol, because and at any time when you're basically eating too much red meat, that is what happens. Now the photographer was actually taking pictures, but all of a sudden he put down his camera and he said, "That's me." And I looked at him and said, "You have a high cholesterol problem." He said, "Well, actually, I'm way over the limit." And a doctor has been ordering him to eat less meat. So cholesterol is not necessarily reflected in your weight. Although it may be, but it is not necessarily. But of course, we know the problem of having high cholesterol. It causes heart diseases. It causes all type of problems. So the way I answer back is, well, first of all, nowadays, what we are eating, when you're eating hot dogs, when you're eating burgers, when you're eating a lot of processed food, all of those are bad nutrients or bad elements to you. Okay? So just by reducing those, first of all, you're not gaining any negative points in your health system. When I turned vegetarian, naturally, I clearly cut all my burger consumption, fried chicken consumption, hot dog consumption, basically junk consumption, right? So, and then just by that alone, actually, believe it or not, I was already feeling better. And then second is I start to read and learn about how to eat a balanced vegetarian, plant-based diet. Now we have many experts here today, where Angie is here, Bobsy is here, so there are people who are much more knowledgeable from a health or nutrition standpoint than I am. But at the minimum nowadays, when we talk about highly nutritious vegetarian food or vegan food, you're talking about some very appealing choices. Quinoa is, of course, always a good choice of protein or any type of nutrients. Kale is a highly nutritious green leaf vegetable. Well, some that I don't need introduction is spinach, broccoli, of course. Always consume a lot of nuts because they are rich in proteins. Beetroot is one of my favorite, and I love avocado. Okay, sometimes when I have simply the avocado for breakfast, and I'm really happy about that. So there are many choices, and so by shifting your diet from removing all the junk, and at the same time learning to eat in a balanced way, and one of the most simple rule of thumb is simply eat as many colors as you can. So whether it's go by 5 colors or 7 colors, but each different color, whether it's blue and purple, whether it's red, whether it's orange or yellow, whether it's white or red, whether it's deep green or dark green. I mean, these different elements of food all help us or our health in different respective ways. So at the end of the day, what happens was every year when I did my checkup, my scorecard was actually quite good. And there were only like very few things, like minor things that sometimes because of my oversight I may have forgotten, and then the next year immediately get better. So, but of course, clearly when you're eating veggie, when you're not eating meats, there is no cholesterol problem. There's no cholesterol in plants. So that's from a health standpoint. And then finally, if you, as the quote, very well said by Paul McCartney, and that is, if you go on YouTube right now, it will take you less than 3 minutes to find a video on factory farming. And the way animals are farmed or raised today, it's just beyond inhumane. It's unwatchable, it's unbearable. And again, there is a difference between taking away an animal's life versus creating all this cruelty and suffering in the process before taking away that life. And of course, at the end of the day, when you kill, that's clearly not a compassionate act, but the process is just unbearable to watch. And anyone who spent 3 minutes, if not less actually, you will turn away because it's just too gross and disgusting. But those are the things that the animals suffer before they're fed to us. So imagine, even if you don't need to be a scientist to know this, but like if any life or any living being has to go through that kind of cruelty and fear when they were living, what would that do to their body? What would that do to basically, their physical condition? It cannot be good, right? I mean, it cannot be good. And we're consuming all of those toxin, all of those bad elements into us. So it doesn't make sense. So again, combined, it's like, I look at it from every angle: health, environment, and from a compassion or humane standpoint, it all adds up. So finally, about 3-4 years ago, and this is a good friend of mine, his name is Francis Tsung-I, and he is the co-founder of Social Ventures Hong Kong. Excuse me. Now, he and I had been good friends for many years, and he is a very creative guy who definitely always think about new ideas to help the society. And I have been doing a lot of different projects, and also sits on the boards of different NGOs or charity organizations to always spread positive energy. So Francis and I, the two of us, we always had dinner or lunch and just brainstorm ideas on how to create some positive disruption to our society. And he, of course, his story is a little bit different from mine. I started 15 years ago. Now, in his case, he started 7 or 8 years ago, but he did not start right away, like a sharp start or cut off. The way he started was, he is a marathon runner. He loves to run. And for whatever reason, I think it was one weekend when he and his wife ate too much. So he said, well, this is really not good for my running. So he started to choose Monday to drop his meat consumption. This is Francis. And then by dropping one day, for some reason, he said, well, I feel lighter when he runs faster and feel more comfortable in the process. So he started to say, well, actually, let me start to do 2 days, 3 days, 4 days, 5 days, 7 days, 6 days, and then finally 7 days. So eventually he became a vegetarian. And the less meat he consumed, the faster he runs. So finally, one time when we were having lunch and we talked about different ideas, and I said, oh, this one doesn't work. This one, I'm not sure if that is scalable. And then finally, we were looking at our dishes and we were both ordering vegetarian. So I forgot who asked the question, but someone popped the question and said, well, should we do something about food? Now, again, because this is something that is sitting in the back of my mind for so long. So when he finally, well, he was the one. So when he finally said, well, let's do something about food, I remember my reaction was, yeah, let's do that. I want to do that for a long time, but just no one resonate that with me. To create, and then because he is the founder of SV Hong Kong, Social Ventures. So whenever he thinks about something, it's not just a one-off campaign, but he wants to build sustainable social business around that. So like 4 years ago, if you talk to someone and say, we are going to start a social business, well, just let's say a business, around the promotion of vegetarianism, like 4 years ago, right? Everyone we asked, they thought we were crazy. Like, okay, well, you want to do a campaign, right? You want to do like, maybe let's say a World Vegetarian Day or an Earth Day campaign. Okay, fine, yeah, we support you, but a social business, what do you mean? What business is there? So you want to start a restaurant? We say, no, we don't cook. We're not chef, we don't cook, and we're not planning to start a restaurant. People were deeply perplexed and clearly skeptical. But in our mind, we were thinking something that potentially could be more horizontal, a platform that is not purely, we use vegetarianism as an entry point, but at the end, we want to promote green lifestyle, sustainable lifestyle, LOHAS. So, of course, fast forward to today, Green Monday has indeed happened. I think there are a couple pillars or elements of Green Monday that makes it unique for a pretty quick adoption by our society, not just in Hong Kong, but we're also spreading outside of Hong Kong as well. First of all, one of the key words is flexitarian. Dr. Wong said that she learned that from me. Well, I copied that from other people too. So I copy and learn that from other people. Well, first of all, Francis himself was a flexitarian before he became a full-time vegetarian. So that's number one. And two, of course, is globally, there is something called Meatless Monday, which is simply about reducing your meat consumption 1/7 of the time. Whether it's Monday, Tuesday, Friday, that's your choice. Now, why we choose Monday is because weekends is usually the time when we overeat. Or holiday, by the way, holidays and weekends. So in Hong Kong, we have our hot pot nights, we have our buffets. Hong Kong is crazy with buffet. I just don't get it. Yeah, I need to watch on time, okay. Hong Kong is crazy with buffet, and we always overeat on weekends. So we just say Monday is a good chance to detox, to eat lighter. And Monday, of course, is symbolic to a new start. Now, we have encountered numerous examples that people who would never even try vegetarianism, but because we say, well, let's try 1 day a week. Okay, if you cannot even do 1 day, let's do 1 meal a week. And then I know a husband was negotiating with his wife. And this guy, by the way, he really has a high cholesterol problem. Like, according to his doctor, if he keeps the diet he eats today, he would die before turning 50. But this guy, because he loves to eat so much, so whatever the doctor ordered him to do, or whatever his wife said to do, he just refused to do it. But then finally, his wife used Green Monday as the way to try to convince her husband, and then say, well, our family is going to do Green Monday, in the house. We're going to do Green Monday in the house. So, like it or not, you follow us. And then the husband say, okay, if we're going to do Green Monday in the house, I will eat out every Monday night. So after doing that for 2 months, like his wife was like, I cannot believe this. He has been eating out every single Monday night. and of course during the day he eats outside, near work. So finally, like his wife came to me and said, "Well, David, what can I do?" I say, "Okay, well, he eats in office or near his work anyway, so lunch we cannot control. Dinner he eats out." So I say, "Okay, let's compromise. We'll do green breakfast, Green Monday breakfast." I said, "Okay, well let's do that." Now I say, "What does your husband usually eat for breakfast?" And the answer is 午餐肉雞蛋公仔麵. So spam with egg and on instant noodles. But this is what Hong Kong people eat. 餐蛋麵, yeah, 餐蛋麵. It's called 餐蛋麵. Yeah, sorry, I'm so unfamiliar. It proves that I am a vegetarian, right? I don't even order this stuff, right? 餐蛋公仔麵. So he eats 餐蛋公仔麵not just every Monday, every morning. That's what he loves. Now imagine you are injecting spam into your body every single day. At the beginning of the day, it's the worst. And breakfast is the most important meal. So anyway, I said, let's do that. I believe he will compromise. So finally, anyway, the wife talked to the husband and said, "Okay, fine, I'll do green breakfast." So instead of doing spam, instant noodles, he started eating, either cereal or actually more different oatmeal, for example. Oatmeal, of course, is good for reduction of cholesterol. Now, amazingly, after a few weeks, the husband thought that actually eating oatmeal is not that miserable. So he turned from eating oatmeal on Monday morning to 5 mornings. Which, in a way, that is a form of Green Monday too. No one says it has to be defined by the day, right? It can be defined by your, the time or the meal you choose. Yeah, I mean, if you cannot do, morning, afternoon, and night, at least choose one time. So this is a good example. Is he just decided to do green breakfast, but just by turning away from spam and instant noodle to oatmeal, for example, and fruits, by the way, for breakfast. Like 3 months later, when he went to the doctor for his annual checkup, the doctor asked him, "What did you do? How come the reading becomes so much better?" And then he said, I didn't do anything. Well, the only thing is I started not eating spam for breakfast." And then the doctor said, "Well, keep doing that, So obviously he started to eat vegetarian at night as well. He started to eat less meat at night whenever, and now he doesn't purposely eat outside for dinner anymore. As a matter of fact, he started to exactly what Vivian was saying is spend more time cooking and eating at home. Yes, so I think that Green Monday, I guess, and I'll wrap this up, is the unique thing about Green Monday, and for many ambassadors here in the room, if you want to convince more people to join, to start, to try, actually, let's start with a baby step. Lower the barrier. So people don't have to feel intimidated. They don't have to feel threatened. It's like, oh my God, I have to give up my stick forever. The unique thing is we don't blame people, we don't shame people. That is never the approach of Green Monday. We always celebrate even the smallest change. But once people make that initial change, basically the shift starts to happen. And you can never underestimate how just by kicking off the beginning, let's get the wheel turning. And once that happens, once the momentum starts generating, people will start to change on their own. And of course, from that point on, people will start to think about other things. The 6 R's. The reduce, reuse, recycle, and the rest, and then the BYOBs, for example. All the other things that they will start paying more attention to, but they were not able to. But once they have this consciousness, eat green, live green, travel green, buy green, etc. And the most recent project that Green Monday, besides partnering with many restaurants to increase their vegetarian menu, is we opened Green Common about 4 months ago or 5 months ago. Our first Green Common is in Wan Chai, And the second one just opened 2 weeks ago in Central, and it is a vegetarian supermarket. And the idea is we want to try to solve any bottlenecks that people have when they try to adopt a green diet. Of course, there are many, many good restaurants out there, but in terms of shopping for vegetarian food, it is very limiting. So if anyone is interested, of course, please feel free to go to website or Facebook. You can visit Green Monday, Green Common, and clearly the Vege COOLiving page, and you will find a lot more information. First of all is why turning green is good for the planet, and second is how to actually live it. So again, it's a pleasure to be here, and happy World Vegetarian Day. Thank you.